Hi, everybody. Welcome to ANN. I'm Alex Stein, coming to you from lovely Benicia, Northern California. Bay Area's best kept secret, but I just let it out, so shh. Anyway, this is our third installment of the Awakening series, and I'm here with Renn Butler. It's beautiful to connect with Renn. Renn, first of all, I really want to express gratitude to you for, Renn came into my life at a point where I needed the door held open for me. It was a time of big transition, and he came with this beautiful perspective of astrology and this beautiful healing perspective. And he's just done such amazing work. His book, The Archetypal Universe, is really, truly my go-to. It has been my go-to reference, since I first got it, whenever that was. And he just does amazing work in astrology, and very grateful to be here with you, Renn. So welcome.
Oh, thanks, Alex. Thanks for your kind words and support. And it's wonderful to be here with you. I remember when that class was starting that you were in, and you posted something on our class Facebook group. And I was like, wow. I was like, okay, here we go. And I knew that, you really knew a lot already. You've been working with Kieran LaGrace, I think,
Yeah.
and others. And we're just operating at such a high level of understanding already.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, one thing that I want to talk about that's been on my mind as far as astrology goes, and I'm going to be kind of hitting on it a lot as we go through the podcast. It's just there's so many different ways to approach astrology, right? And of course, we're doing archetypal astrology, where we're focusing mainly on planets and their aspects. But really what I love about this particular form of astrology, not that it's I don't want to play the whole game of my astrology is better than yours, but that it's a learnable language, right? And once you have that language in place, you can really learn to speak that language and start to see it at work everywhere. And when you start to do that, I guess I'm going to mix metaphors now, but it's like this music. It really is like the music of the spheres comes alive. You're listening to the world in a new way. And I think it can sometimes, in the study of astrology, it can get so dense, and you can get so overloaded with information that you don't know where to make heads or tails, and it gets to be kind of this maybe a fixation on personality traits or fortune telling or whatever. But it's really through this particular approach to astrology that draws me so much, is that it has taught me to, it's basically just tuned my mind to be able to start to perceive things at another dimensional level in a really cool way. And so yeah, it's kind of my jam.
Yeah, I know the feeling. There are fewer moving parts, right?
Yeah.
It's really stripped down to Greek basics. The sun, moon, and 8 planets and their interrelationships. And it reminds me of that Neil Young song, 10 men working, but it's actually, 10 goddesses and gods working.
Yeah.
Wah,
Yeah.
bah. Yeah, I've often thought that, before Rick, there was a school of astrology for every single astrologer in the world. That no two astrologers really agreed, because there were just so many moving parts, and nobody was quite sure what the relative strengths of the different ones were. And yes, I believe that now in archetypal astrology, there is a shared frame of reference that everyone can learn. It's not very difficult to learn it, but it takes a long time to learn all the different songs that those
Yes.
10 archetypes working tonight can put out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the big shift that it leads to, is the realization of that, multivalence, multidimensionality, the idea that when we're talking about an archetype or an archetypal combination of planets, we're not talking about one thing, you know. Like we're learning to listen to like a something from another level, that then when you start to see it that way, that things don't have to be one way. I think that's the biggest gift that this has given me, and why it was so integral in like everything that's followed for me, and it branches out into more than just astrology, right? I think that at a certain point it starts to branch out into just your approach to life in terms of seeing things, the ability to see things from many perspectives at once.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This is one of Rick's major articulations, is the multi-leveled and multivalent manifestation of archetypes. Saturn square Pluto transit can show up in our relationships, in our body, in our thinking, in our sessions. That's multi-leveled. And it's also multivalent. There are many different manifestations we can experience. The intense compression of the no exit stage of labor connected with Saturn, or we can face the grisly visceral aspects of the dynamic stage of labor connected with Pluto. We can work really hard. We can sometimes get in touch with inhuman levels of discipline. There's just so many different manifestations that have yet the same core root.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's a helpful thing to know too, because like there's always this tendency, I think when a person starts to learn astrology, you know, and they learn a little bit about their chart, and then there's all this confirmation for like for everything, right? For like all of your awesome traits and all of your like, you know, challenges. And it can be very easy to then land on a okay, well, this is why, you know, this is why I am the way I am, and the end. And then like kind of hunker down into like a like I guess I'm sentenced to it forever. I mean, like I've got a Saturn Pluto on my ascendant, you know, Saturn Pluto moon on my ascendant. And, you know, if you know anything about astrology, well, like what you just described, it's not like if you went to the store and were like picking out astrology alignments, you probably pass that one by. But like, you know, over time through the inner work, right? That kind of thing comes to be sort of your greatest, certainly your greatest teacher, but a lot of, I feel the real gifts that have come to me have come through that, you know? And so like being able to see all of those different perspectives, it's very, very helpful.
Yeah, yeah, and I totally relate to that 100%. I mean, before Jung, I would say the state of astrology was in a very sorry state. And through Dane Rudyard, Liz Green, Rob Hand, Jung's work kind of made it into mainstream astrology, and thus the psychological schools of astrology are really the closest cousins or siblings to Rick's approach in archetypal astrology. But the integration of Stan Grof's discoveries is an equally important quantum leap, and it has really offered additional ways for us to redeem and heal and work through our difficult aspects. And as far as choosing Moon, Saturn, Pluto at the archetype store, like I chose that one. I've got Moon, Saturn, almost exact sesqui-square Pluto.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, you know, we'll spend the podcast dumping out our sacks of coal and comparing. So,
Christmas came early for the listeners today.
yeah. Um, cool. Yeah. So, you know, another thing that you mentioned at the beginning, or that we were talking about, was this idea of the stripped down approach and how valuable that is. And I think that's a good thing to be discussing today, actually, because we're right now we're recording this during a triple conjunction of Sun, Mercury, Saturn, right? And that's going to be going into the first week of March. And, you know, there's this like getting down to basics thing. You know, what information is useful? What information is it like worth my time to be dealing with? Because you can find with Sun Saturn, or I'm sorry, Saturn Mercury, and now with the sun kind of shining the light on it, and adding the sense of value and like what's important, that just anything that's extraneous becomes problematic. Any kind of cluttering of the mind, any kind of extra weight, it doesn't help, you know, that there's this fine line, especially when we're dealing with stuff that is, you know, frankly esoteric. You know, we're looking into other dimensions of consciousness when we're dealing with astrology. The mind has an interesting role to play in that it's got to be clean, it's got to be focused, but it's also got to be open, and it's also got to get out of the way, you know, and not try to rule the day. So I think that kind of gets highlighted today. So you know, Saturn's been a lot on my mind because of this transit the last few days, and you know, maybe you can share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, like we're a working ship, you know. Let's throw all the extraneous baggage over the edge, you know.
Yeah.
It's like Doolittle's squadron had to be able to take off on a very short runway, so they had to dump all the extra stuff overboard, you know, to make it airborne. And
Yeah.
that's what we're shooting for.
Yeah.
So astrology that really helps people,
Mm.
you know. It's not just sort of a parlor game or a way to astound people or something like that.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
do hope to astound you today, but
I mean, I you know, I think there is some value to being astounded. Like I know during my first reading, like the first really good reading that I got was astounding to me, because I was like, how the hell did you know that? You know, just like, and it really made an impression on me of like what, how is that possible? You know? But I personally find that, and I tried at the beginning to kind of do readings in this fashion where I was like really like trying to know everything ahead of time. And I just found that maybe there are people that can do that, like, I don't know, but for me, and I think that this is an important point, is like, it's like, what is your intention with it? And for me, it's a healing and awakening intention. It's a, you know, what am I really? You know, who am I really? And how can I effectively move through what feels to be like burdens and challenges to me, to realize the perfection of life. Like that's essentially what I'm in it for. And you know, if astrology serves that, then wonderful, you know. And so you know, to me it's much more interesting, like when talking to a client, to you know, to actually talk to them and see what's going on in their life, and get a sense of how, you know, because these are infinite possible expressions of the archetypes, you know, to see how it's actually expressing. And then from there it's like, okay, like I can hear the music now, like let's go, you know.
yeah, just help them to up their game a little bit in terms of their relationship with their unconscious
Yeah.
psyche. Do they have ways to process the problematic archetypes like Mars, Pluto, Saturn, especially, and just to go from where they are to maybe the next step for them in terms
Yeah.
of access to breath work or psychedelic assisted psychotherapy or some other modality that might help them.
Yeah.
Yeah, astrology is just the map, you know. We have to get our hands on the wheel and drive that car.
True. True. Yeah. So I think I can I'll share the screen and we can take a look at some of the transits we've got right now and then coming up through March.
I
And
just have to say that is the most beautiful camera you've got there, man. That is incredible. Talk
thank
about
you.
up in your game. That is
Yeah,
really,
it's called the Lumina something. I don't know. Yeah, Lumina.
he said it was like AI enhanced or something. I asked him if he could imitate Joe Biden's voice. He couldn't, so I figured he must not
Yeah.
be AI, you know.
Yeah. So anyway, here we got the transits for March 1st. You know, and we see that we're still in this Sun, Saturn, Mercury triple conjunction there. And you know, and that is side by side with the conjunction that's, you know, now gonna it's going to peak in April of Jupiter and Uranus, right? Which also Jupiter and Uranus is in a square with Venus and Mars here. So there's a very different flavor, you know, between these sets of archetypes at this moment, right? And I think this is one of the really beautiful things about astrology too, is that it's like the only system, well, I don't know, maybe there are other systems, but it's one that I know of that like is able to hold the idea that multiple things can be going on at once, you know, and it's like, well, how can that be? Well, it's like, you know, look at your life and you know that it's true. Like one part of you might be like, you know, all scrunched up and fearful, and another part of you might be like joyful and generous. And it doesn't have to be one thing or the other, right? So yeah, I don't know. You want to share any thoughts you got on any of these alignments?
Yeah, really good points there. And it's really important that we feel the emotions that are surfacing in us at a given time without trying to change them.
Yeah.
Just make space for them. And, you know, with this Sun, Mercury, Saturn, we might be feeling some fear. There could be some worry. We might be looking at the cup of life as half empty in certain ways. We're seeing what's not working. And it's important to let ourselves have that experience. But then maybe after our work's done, after our day job's finished, then we can go out and socialize with friends. This Venus, Mars, square Jupiter, Uranus is so expansive, wildly lush, fun, and exciting. It's like major Jupiter Uranus expansive breakthroughs involving our social life, our romantic life, our sexual life, and also the flow of energy, the amount of dynamic energy and creative inertia that we feel, positive inertia, Mars, can all be expanded and opened and amplified. These are great transits for parties, events, dances, and I think people will be having some amazing experiences dancing if you get a chance to under those archetypes.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, you know, it's been a very interesting week for me in like my own just kind of in my own process, because I've been really feeling both of these archetypes at once. And actually for like, I've been surprisingly enjoying the Sun Saturn thing, because it's interesting, you know, the Jupiter Uranus, I mean, Jupiter Uranus is like when you're feeling that archetypal pair, like you just feel invincible. I mean, it's just like it's nice, man. It's a good one, right? It really just greases the wheels of whatever it is. You know, it's just bursts of insight, bursts of sudden freedom, you know, liberation, the sense of it's like a big yes, right? And everything's possible. But you know, we also know that like when you feel that way, like, you know, there's a clinical term for that called mania, right? Like when it gets off the rails, right? It gets like, you know, it's almost just like, yeah, and you come crashing down. And you know, so I've been really feeling the interplay between these, because I've, you know, like I've had my moments of inflation and deflation. And like there's this thing that I'm finding with the Sun Saturn of like this beautiful sobriety, this beautiful sense of like I can participate in great things. I can have big insights. I can have a big breakthrough, but I don't need to like appropriate it for my own grandeur, you know, like because when I do that, like it ends up souring the whole deal, you know? And so there's this weird combination of like lately I feel that the more I humble myself, like the more that I just kind of, you know, I just sort of like look at my failings, like look at the things that I kind of go like, oh man, like, all right, I said that, I did that. The more that I'm able to look at that without judging it and without freaking out about it, um, but but like allowing myself to like just feel the like, you know, um, almost like embarrassed within, like kind of a feeling. The more freedom I feel to like just enjoy, and it feels like the world has more gifts to offer in that way, because like when we're trying to be perfect, which is also a thing that comes with Sun Saturn, this obsession with doing the right thing and fitting within a certain structure and like being seen well in the eyes of others, you can't admit imperfection, right? And so you're trying to hold yourself to this abstract kind of cookie cutter thing that doesn't really admit all of the gradations of life, right? So things get dried out, things get kind of, it's no good, right? um and yet when you start to allow what's in you to be there, it's even if it's ugly and difficult, like it's like higher resolution life, and that's something that I'm finding is coming through with this combination of archetypes for me. It's like this interesting thing where I'm just like feeling really good even as I'm like going, damn. So yeah.
Wow, that's good to hear. Yeah, it's really important that we try to keep our Jupiter and our Saturn together so that we don't have the boom and bust cycles. So periods where we're suffering and we're paying off previous mistakes and so on, and holding patterns, and then we get some leash from the universe and then we overdo it. We try to compensate and have some achievement that will forever prevent us from going back into that Saturnian place. We're going to go for it, and then we create another cycle. So it's better to have those two sides of us, keep them together so that whatever Jupiter is coming through, and there's a lot happening with that Jupiter Uranus, as you said, that's helping us to feel our Saturn, and the benefit comes in a more stable and mature way in our everyday life to
Yeah.
heal our emotional wounds. Another thing about Jupiter Uranus is, and combined with Mars, especially like that, let yourself come down after the high, the rush. Don't try to prop it up with like amphetamines or meth or something like that. Some people, this is like rock star energy, right? This
Oh
is
yeah.
Eddie Van Halen, Mars, Jupiter, Uranus. I think also David Lee Roth, I think they both had Mars, Jupiter, Uranus.
That makes sense. Yeah. That
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
jumping around and just like smiling on top of the world, that's a nice feeling to have. But the Sun, Mercury, Saturn really is, as you said, that sober purity and clarity of mind. Work is a beautiful thing. Find what you love to do, and if maybe it's your hobbies, follow your bliss, as Joseph Campbell said. It Hillman wrote a whole book about the psychology of work, the workspace, like how do you have the light and how do you set up your desk and what's on your desk and the rhythm of your day. We just got back from a month in Mexico and three different places in Mexico, and it was really fun. And the Mexican people are so kind and loving and amazing people. Um, and I had a lot of fun, met some old friends and or new friends, and hung out with some of our best old friends. And that was great. And I'm also really enjoying this time back home where every day I have this routine that is totally self-created, and I can get in like 6, 7, or even more hours a day of work every day, and just putting pieces on that big jigsaw puzzle in that takes time and no other way around it. That's very satisfying.
Mm,
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. Looking back at that Mars Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, I think that I might be mistaken on one of these, but I'm pretty sure. I think that both, I think Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, had that, right? So the first guy to rocket, woo, right? And that's the thing that Rick Tarnas talks about in Cosmos and Psyche, right? Is that the Jupiter Uranus cycle has been, it's like clockwork, just with the space program, with aviation, with technology, with great scientific advancements, like any of these things that kind of let us, leap beyond ourselves in some way, are kind of the work of the Jupiter Uranus archetype. You put Mars in there, and it really just it really just gives you that extra force. And so it's one of those beautiful things to see, like, the first guy rocketing into space, has that alignment.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. Yeah, it really gives you propulsion and lift and velocity, thrust, in an exciting, grand way. And it's interesting that that private company just landed a lander on the south pole of the moon, and I guess it was dancing its way along the surface, and one of its left feet tripped on a rock and it tipped over. So
Uh,
there you go. But I guess it's still transmitting as far as I've heard.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and then also with the Venus in there. Now, I don't know. I can't think of anybody who's got that quadruple combination. But Steve Jobs has the combination of Venus, Jupiter, Uranus, right? And you think about the aesthetic dimension of Apple, like that's the whole thing with Apple, right? It's the aesthetic, it's the user interface, it's the glossy machine, it's the nice camera, it's all of that, right? Um, so it's very interesting to see how, you know, this is one of my favorite things, is to do these comparisons where you take like an archetypal pair like Jupiter Uranus, and you see what it is with Mars, and you see what it is with Venus, or and then you look at different artworks or different people's quotes or whatever, and it comes through in these really cool ways.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Yeah, the Apple products really are beautiful. It's like the Starbucks of computers, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. So shall we go
Yeah.
forward a little bit?
How about right there?
Yeah.
Um, you'll notice here, everybody, that now Mercury has just got into the midpoint of this Saturn-Neptune. Remember, this is the big conjunction that's coming up this month in March, and we'll have that for 3 years. That'll be one of the dominant influences in the collective psyche. And you can see here that it's 16.5 degrees between Saturn and Neptune. We use a 15-degree orb, but these midpoints from Mercury and the Sun are, some people will start to feel it like as early as about the third, I would say. Um, there can be a sort of a sense of a grimness. There can be sometimes conflicts between our ideals and the manifestation. Like artists might have to deal with the issue of selling out, like George Costanza said in Seinfeld, I'm not going to dumb it down for a mass audience, but we have to in order to get published. We have to make it accessible. That's not dumbing it down, but if that's an important part of the process, that the Saturnian part, the editing,
Mm.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. That I hadn't thought about that midpoint. And but I have been thinking about the Saturn Neptune, and just looking at the way things are going right now. If you just kind of like take a step back, and you look at what we went through in the 2010s uh with the Uranus Pluto square, right? And all the just massive, huge transformations, huge liberations, but also, that coming in of the authoritarian wave and Trump and the whole thing, just all of those kind of cataclysmic changes. And then, we move into Saturn, Pluto, and we got COVID, and like suddenly the whole world is like just, mired in this, fear. And then we go into Saturn, Uranus, and we've got like this just extreme separation that really hasn't resolved, right? It's like something broke, and it's just kind of just going, right? And meanwhile, it kind of feels like civilization, the environment, everything are on this kind of collision course with, or something, or just this kind of slow, just kind of just, it's just, nobody knows how to kind of stop this thing from happening, nor maybe feels that it should be stopped, but also isn't really down with the way it's all coming apart. So it's like, I sort of feel like there's going to be this moment with Saturn, Neptune, where there's like this, maybe it's just a sobering realization of like, well, shit, like, look at what we gone and did, and it could be, it could have to do with, and probably now in early March with this Mercury midpoint, there could be some little intimations of that. I mean, I think a lot of us are already feeling it anyway, but probably, around 2026, like it's going to be more ubiquitously palpable, and I don't know, like, I don't want to make predictions, but yeah, I sort of feel like there might be some kind of thing to do with the climate, the ocean, or just something where we just go like, ugh, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm reading one of Irvin Laszlo's books right now, Science in the Akashic Field, and really accessible. What a brilliant guy. Groff considers him the first thinker who has successfully connected all the dots for the new scientific paradigm.
Cool.
And so really interesting. And he says something, we have stupendous technology, but we're essentially a rudderless civilization right now.
Yeah.
Lost the old certainties. I mean, the previous certainties were around colonial domination, like our race is gonna, our country's gonna beat your country. And that was one of the main things. And then, now there's the deconstruction era, postmodernism, we're tearing down all the old certainties. That's an important stage. But what is the new overarching vision that will sustain us? What is the point of life? What is the point of civilization? I think there will be a lot of soul searching during this time. It can be, Saturn, Neptune can be disillusioning. It can be demoralizing. People can question their basic certainties. It can sometimes feel like we're sinking through the floor. What we thought was solid is no longer solid.
Yeah.
I imagine that a lot of people on the center, including center right and left of American politics, will begin to get a rising fear um, about the prospect of Trump getting reelected. I think this is so dangerous, and I would not recommend that we find out what that will be like. Don't sleepwalk into this disaster. He is
Yeah.
an anti-democratic autocrat who
Yeah.
cares only about himself. So vote and, find in yourself the sort of commitment to let's keep things going with democracy. We don't want to slide off the rails, either to the right or the left. It's the moderate majority that makes civilization possible.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. And, and I think it is true too that, it's becoming clear that so much of what our civilization is built on, all these comforts that we have, everything that we take for granted, that increasingly that stuff is going to be less, it's going to be less certain, it's going to be less of a given. And I think there's going to have to be this reckoning that comes increasingly, and I think that the Saturn-Neptune will probably have to do with it, of again, because Saturn is always bringing us back to what's essential, what matters, and with Neptune, it's Neptune is what connects us, essentially. Neptune is what it's like the womb in which we're all existing and coming from, right? And so while it can have this kind of grim, difficult side to it, and it will most certainly carry a lot of that with it, I think that through that soul searching, it will be a time where maybe we'll start to see some new real intimations of kind of what the next steps might be, and realizing that those steps might not be big grand steps all at once type of things, but it's like, what are the small steps that each of us is gonna have to take, kind of a thing.
Right, and we're brought to the introspective process and reevaluation process through our suffering, and everyone is suffering. That's the first principle of Buddhism, and I believe that the legalization of psychedelic medicines as prescription medicines for therapists and psychiatrists, which could begin as early as August with MAPS application with MDMA. That's the best case scenario, August. I think is an incredibly promising development. And it doesn't matter what people's political convictions are, their religion, their belief systems. Everyone is suffering. We're all in this together. And if people go to their doctor or their therapist and they get some good advice, maybe they get a chance to do some real self-exploration and then find their own answers for themselves. And become a better version of themselves. People don't all become the same when they do deep inner work. They become a better version of themselves, a higher version of themselves. And Saturn Neptune will really help that. This can be the part of the process where people lose the previous certainties. But blessedly, we have Uranus sextile Neptune beginning this year as well, I believe. So that will be a huge help. And then the Uranus trine Pluto as well. These are very, very supportive archetypes.
Yeah. One thing that I'm very interested, because I just think about, like, really, what does the future hold? Like so much is changing, and we're gonna have to pass through some hard stuff. But there was something that you said. I think it was that you're talking about Ervin Laszlo, and it made me think of this idea that, like, oh yeah, that we have all of this capability, right? We have all of this scientific know-how. We've got and then plus there's all the money we could ever need, right, is in existence. And yet we can't seem to be able to put our cleverness and put our resources into just helping everybody, helping lift everybody. And yet, like, it's quite possible. Like, it really is quite possible if the will was there, right? If things operated in such a way that for example, people felt that they had enough money when they finally had $1 billion or something, or whatever, and it's not like, this isn't about blaming anybody or demonizing anybody. It's about, like, seeing the forces that we have been living with and seeing how they're starting to go down, and really just feeling like you can get worked up and angry about, like, God damn it, like, why can't we, well, it's like the Jesus commercial. I don't know if you remember that Jesus commercial. Like, what did they spend, like $100 million to put the Jesus commercial on the Super Bowl, and nobody was happy about it, right? It was like liberals were pissed off because it was like a commercial for Jesus, and like conservatives were pissed off because it was like showing like, you know, Jesus washing the feet of like gay people and stuff. And so like, so everybody was just like, and then they spent $100 million and, you know, people were like, that $100 million could have been spent on this, or that, but they spent it on this stupid commercial. And it's like, well, you know, and it's true. But then also, like, you can say that about any amount of money that's being used for anything right now. Like, there's so much money that it just isn't being used to in a constructive way. And I think that, yeah, you know, it's just, so I don't know where it's going to go, but you know, disillusioning, the dissolving of structures is a helpful part of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm
When
also,
you mentioned the Jesus commercial, I just had an image of Jesus sitting at a table, and then there's Buddha and Lao Tzu and a couple other ones, and he's saying like, "You've tried the other ones, try the best."
yeah.
Pick me, you know, pick me. But yeah, you know, Neptune in astrology represents satisfaction. It represents connection, higher meaning, security, and it's connected in the Groff Tarnas understanding with the memory of the good womb. That's the fetus in a good womb is still connected with the divine consciousness, the infinite and eternal. It doesn't have the worries about mortality and suffering that you know most of us do. Saturn, on the other hand, represents ending of that endings of that state, problems, barriers, constrictions. And so Saturn Neptune, as you've been talking about, Alex, is very much about satisfaction versus dissatisfaction. How much is enough? I believe that Dwayne Elgin coined the term voluntary simplicity, and I think he had a Saturn Neptune aspect, if I'm not mistaken. Someone else had a great phrase: maximum satisfaction, minimum consumption.
Mm.
You know, we may not all be able to have massive lawns and you know, spray the water of our great grandchildren away because we just feel like having a massive lawn, you know, deplete the groundwater and the rivers. But we can be much happier than we are.
Yeah.
Those two things are not necessarily, you know, in a sort of a even ratio. So there's a lot of breakthrough that is possible on the inside, and so far for the last few hundred years there's been a mad rush toward accumulation of possessions.
Mm.
You know, and we need to add to that this looking at our own psyche.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one thing, since you mentioned the Uranus Neptune sextile, and you know, Uranus Neptune is like Uranus Jupiter. It's just like, give me more. You know, it's like, it's such a beautiful combination because you got that liberating, awakening power of Uranus, and then you've got that unifying, you know, mystical and visionary and imaginative dimension of Neptune, and they come together. And of course, you know, during the major alignments, you know, like the 90s, you know, with, you know, the rise of the internet, MTV, you know, electronic and world music, and just like all of this kind of mixture of different stuff, and like new forms coming out and new possibilities. And there can be a kind of rose-colored glasses thing to it, of like, you know, and back in the 90s during the conjunction, there was this sense of like, you know, like, oh, we went through civil rights, and, you know, we know that racism is bad and we're done with that. And like, yay. And like everybody's gonna like hold hands around the world, and we're one world, we're a united globe. And there was that kind of, and the beautiful thing about that is that it like, when these alignments come around, is that they implant in us that sense of what can be, of our higher potential, and they show us paths to it, right? And they awaken that possibility in us. but then it's through the harder kind of Saturn work and the testing that comes through Pluto or whatever that it like kind of, we see where, okay, maybe we're still carrying some of that old crap with us, and now we got to make it real. So, but one thing that I'm thinking of with, I've been thinking for a long time about like, okay, when are we going to start seeing an uptick in more kind of cooperative technology, like where the technology that we create uses nature's intelligence, or it like dialogues with nature's intelligence, rather than it's a human made thing that is like over and against nature. And we're starting to see things like this, like plastics made from mycelium, and one thing that I read about recently, which is really cool, is this they're like harvesting electricity, or they're generating electricity through beeswax by harvesting sound. So like basically like using some kind of contraption made of beeswax to take ambient sound from the environment and convert it into electricity. And they're talking about how there's going to be like maybe textiles that have this woven into it, where you can just be in the cafe and like power your laptop or or whatever.
Wow. Well, my Uncle Bob used to love to go on. I could get one of those near him. That'd be good. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Should we look at
Oh
advance
yeah,
it 4 days ahead?
yeah,
March
sure.
7th. Interesting. Look at that sweet moon, Mars, Venus, and also March 8th. Actually even sweeter on the 8th. Um, moon, Venus, Mars. So that should be a unusually passionate
Mm.
couple of days. I guess the 7th probably even more so because of the square to Jupiter, Uranus. So a great time for a party or a dance or something like that.
Totally.
The new moon on the 9th is maybe a little on grimmer. Um, you see, the new moon is the sun
Yeah.
and moon together in the sky, so we don't see the moon because it's right next to the sun, and there it is, closely conjunct Saturn. So it's a good time for introspection. The parties of the Venus, Jupiter, Uranus might suddenly seem not to be the deepest, most rewarding things. It's a little more of a sobering up again kind of feeling, as you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah. A little bit of a hangover.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then also during that time there's the conjunction of Mercury and Neptune. And that's Mercury Neptune's an interesting one. It gets a bad rap. Um, it's hard to handle. It can There can be a lot of confusion that comes, because basically you think about like Mercury is our I think of Mercury as the like administrative assistant of the planets. And Mercury is it's the mind. It keeps us organized, it keeps us oriented, it keeps us, it organizes our perception, our flow of thought, our action. And this is why people make such a big deal during Mercury retrograde, is because like we like to have our perceptions, thoughts, actions, kind of making sense to us, right? Mercury is what we use to make sense. But you put Mercury in conjunction with Neptune. Neptune's this dissolver of boundaries, right? Things are not linear in Neptune's domain. And so, what you can get with Mercury Neptune can be on the more mundane and kind of like maybe challenging side of it, is that information gets tangled up. You get kind of lost in the soup of information. There's miscommunications. There's maybe a little bit of uh, deceit or self-deceit. A tendency to look at things in an idealist, like a overly ideal sort of way. But then on the other side, there can be really great access to insights, and particularly it's a great one also, I find, for music, and for just also really appreciating astrology and like getting into the kind of metaphorical dimension of things, that analogical quality that astrology has, where you can, you look at, for example, we were talking earlier about Mars Uranus, and or Mars Jupiter Uranus, and like Eddie Van Halen like wailing on the guitar, and Yuri Gagarin like going into space. Like you can just feel the similarity between those, an astronaut and a guy wailing on the guitar. There's like something that's in there. And Mercury Neptune, I feel, really has like access to that. It's like very comfortable thinking about things in that way. Um, yeah. I also find that like a great, like personally, because I've actually got that alignment in my own birth chart. And when my mind gets like overly saturated with like, oh, there's too much information, I'm trying to be too linear, um, I'll either go and play music, or I'll draw geometry with a compass and straight edge. And that one really, that like nothing sets my mind back in like a calm, empty state like that. It's very interesting when it's like overly saturated with like
Yeah, yeah, it's a good time to daydream. Active imagination. Just let your mind go wherever it wants to go. That's the essence of meditation and successful psychedelic journeying, is just give up control, let it
yeah,
go wherever it wants to go. And Caroline Casey has a great comment about this, and as she does with so many things. Um, Mercury Neptune can be like the archetypal equivalent of spending a day on the beach. You know how that good that is for your soul at certain times, or at least going for a walk on the beach. We don't have to always be sort of putting nose to the grindstone.
yeah,
Sometimes it's just to let that Neptunian ocean just kind of wash through our minds.
yeah, it's true. And there's you can hear that, like I believe that Bob Dylan has an opposition or a square or something. He's got some hard alignment of those two planets, and it comes across in his kind of like stream of consciousness lyrics, right? um yeah, you just, and it doesn't have to make sense, but like that's the thing that I like sometimes about Bob Dylan's lyrics, is that like they don't always make sense, and they don't need to, but they're telling you something. you know
The pump don't work because the vandal took the handles.
yeah,
Kid, it's something you did. Yeah, it's like so fun to sing along to. Yeah,
yeah. um
yeah. Um, you want to head up to March 12th,
sure.
and maybe the 13th would be. You can see it now. Look at this amazing Moon Jupiter Uranus triple conjunction. This is an exciting transit and this will happen every month for the next few months while that Jupiter Uranus is still in orbit through June. Uh, Exciting emotional breakthroughs of community. People under Jupiter Uranus in general can meet new friends that have a emancipate. The friendship then goes on to have an emancipatory, exciting, growth promoting quality. Um, if you are medically and psychologically healthy enough to do psychedelics, and you have sitters and so on, that is a wonderful timing for a session. The next day as well, the 14th, would be pretty special,
Yeah,
all other things considered.
yeah, and there's also Sun Neptune on that day, which is also nice for a session as well.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, the have you ever seen this movie Babette's Feast?
yeah, I did.
Yeah, it's a really good one, and it's based on a story by Isaac Dinesen, who I believe has a moon Jupiter. I'm not sure if she's got Uranus in there, but it's a very moon Jupiter kind of movie about this woman who's servant. She's a French woman who has left Paris, and she's like, she used to be a chef, like the greatest chef at the greatest restaurant in Paris, and this is like in the 19th century. Now she's like serving these Puritan ladies in Denmark as their maid, and like it's very uptight community. Nobody has any joy in anything. And one day she wins the lotto, and she decides to spend all of her money to like produce this amazing feast for the town. And they see them, like they're trucking in like wine and geese and a big turtle and like all of this, and candles and like all of this stuff, and they're like, oh, it's sinful, it's sinful, and everybody's like in this big, whoa, what's gonna happen? And then they all have the meal, and like through the course of the meal, like they break down their defenses, and suddenly like everybody is just kind of in love with each other and with life and existence and like, and it's through the meal. And it's a very very Moon Jupiter kind of a thing, you know. I always
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, yeah. Not the happiest day for the turtle. Anyways, yeah, I'd like to see the sequel to that, Babette's Feast 2, Time for Dessert. Babette's Feast 3, fuck off, I'm full.
Yeah.
Just a tiny
Before I
little
shouldn't have done that.
one tiny little after dinner wafer. Yeah. Yeah, so that'll be the equivalent of Babette's Feast there, turtle and everything.
Yeah.
So do you want to head up to March 21st?
Sure.
So equinox, of course. So around March 21st, Saturn gets within orb of Neptune. We use a 15-degree applying. And so this is really when this transit officially begins for 3 years. We will walk you through this 3-year period. You can count on us every month. We'll be going through it with you, and we'll be offering as much support and helpful tips as we can as we go through this. It's kind of like stormy water a little bit. There's many metaphors that you could use to describe it, but or like a dark cloud descending upon the party.
Yeah.
We need rain though, so it will definitely have a positive side, but this is that Saturn Neptune. And Mars will also be, coming in orb of the Saturn. So Saturn is at the midpoint of the Mars and Neptune right around the equinox. So, we will definitely notice that.
Mm.
Now, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. We've also got, Venus is conjunct Saturn that day, right? And and we'll also be in wide orb to Neptune, but Venus Saturn it can be one of those things where like it's a little bit harder to have fun. It's a little bit harder to access joy with Saturn Venus, and of course Venus relating to relationships. There can be sometimes challenges and everything, but it's also like just like we were talking about earlier with Saturn, there can be this appreciation for simplicity and for the things that matter. And so when Venus comes around with Saturn, those are the kinds of things that you might be experiencing. Say is like, on the one hand, maybe feeling like, he never, and just kind of like thinking negatively in your relationship. Or it could be like, just feeling the deep appreciation for the commitment and for, just simple time together and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like stirring the oatmeal phase of a relationship, which is the longest phase of the relationship. That's the real relationship, right?
Yeah.
I mean, oatmeal's good for us, and it's reliable and fortifying, but you can add things to it. You can even add salsa to it and an egg, or maple syrup. You can add almond butter, banana, just
Yeah, ramen noodles. I don't know about that.
if you're having like a relationship in college, you could add some noodles to it too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a good day to talk about it since it's still like we were talking about earlier, Sun, Mercury, Saturn. I mean, the more I just live with Saturn, the more I realize that like a happy relationship with Saturn is a happy life, basically. I mean, you could say the same with like Pluto and Mars, any of the hard planets, but Saturn's the one that's like continually like just on your ass, right? Like, like you're gonna feel Saturn, and if you fight against it, you know, and kind of have a grumbly relationship with it, well, Saturn will grumble back, right? But if you just kind of find the sweetness of like the simplicity, slowing down, what matters, it's almost like everything else kind of falls into place a little bit. So,
Yeah, well said. Yeah,
yeah.
good points. I moved about 50 times in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Back and forth to California and Vancouver, Victoria, Edmonton, Onaway, all around. And I've been in the same apartment that you see behind me for 20 years now. And before that, immediately before that, I was in a heritage mansion nearby here for 12 years. So a much more Saturnian, outer life, you could say. And the reason I was able to do that was because I finally found a pathway to work through all the crazy and chaotic and tumultuous energies that everyone has inside their psyche in my sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want a lot of hassle in my outer life. I want things organized and neat, and it's fun to create and long-term projects that take work over many months or years. And but it's not enough just to live a quiet, sort of obedient, careful life. Those are important things. We have to obey our understanding of universal law and also the world around us. But we have to also find ways for the crazy Dionysian energies, the Promethean, the Aphrodite and the Persephone and Ishtar archetypes to manifest in our psyches, and that's where psychedelic assisted psychotherapy or breathwork sessions can come in. And so without that, then Saturn, it just becomes kind of pointless,
Yeah.
like hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way. uh, uh, Pink Floyd, both of those major songwriters in Pink Floyd, Gilmore and I've forgotten
Roger Waters.
Roger Waters, are both Saturn-Neptune, and their
Yeah.
music really has a Saturn-Neptune feeling.
It really does. I mean, like, yeah, if anybody wants to know about Saturn, Neptune, and like, like I was talking about earlier, like it's really about hearing the music of the planets. Like, well, music is a great way to hear the music of the planets. And
Yeah, Music of the Spheres. Yeah, listen to Dark Side of the Moon, voted the album of the decade by Rolling Stone. That was too heavy for me to listen to when I was a kid. I was like, I'm ready to face this.
I know.
They're living in the Saturn Neptune and in such a beautiful way,
It's
like
true. It's true. Yeah. Another group, not as famous, but from the 90s, there was this kind of electronic group called Portishead. I don't know if you remember Portishead, but they have a very Saturn Neptune vibe. It's this like trip hop, kind of like a little spooky, a little sad, a little like, and man, it's just got this atmosphere that you're just like, yeah. And that's one of those things that it's one of these things that I love about archetypal astrology, about like the planetary aspects, is that you can listen to something. Like if you once you know this language well, you can be listening to something and you can just like call the aspect. Or maybe not the aspect, but the combination. Just listen to it and be like, that sounds pretty Saturn Neptune to me. And then you look it up and you're like, yeah, all right.
Right. Yeah. There's like 45 major flavors, right? And nuances of those, that sun, moon, sun, Mercury out to Neptune, Pluto. There's 45 of those. And then you get triads, combinations of three. There are 140, I think 145 of those, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. And
Yeah.
it really is interesting to see those core components. That song, Great Gig in the Sky,
Oh yeah.
it's so poignant and sorrowful. The vocalizing in the
Yeah,
back.
just the voice.
Claire
Yeah.
Torres was this amazing singer that they had there. And then it suddenly resolves after. With Saturn Neptune, it's harder to repress our Saturnian pain and fear. Neptune is the no boundaries archetype, and it's harder to put a lid on the cellar door. It just comes up and kind of permeates our consciousness, which is a good thing because we face it. It's harder to repress it. Saturn Neptune makes people salt of the earth. They realize they're the same as everyone else. No better, no worse. We're all cut from the same divine cloth, and it moistens Saturn so it can flow up as a flow of experiences rather than being stuck, static structure in our psyche that's still undermining our happiness.
Yeah.
So that's really beneficial. And that song carries that feeling of, after a certain amount of time, the sorrow, the sort of the tears of sorrow become the healing waters of life. There's this feeling of mercy. She hits the resolved chord in that song, Great Gig in the Sky. It's just, there's nothing like that.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Shall we look forward a little bit?
Yeah, the new moon, or the full moon rather, on the 24th and 25th is pretty special. It's lined up with Neptune.
Oh yeah.
And so quite different than the new moon around March 9th. This full moon will be much more Neptunian and sublime and numinous and enchanting. So that should be something to look forward to.
Yeah, definitely. And there's oh, let's see, and Venus, Venus is kind of just squeaking in there. No.
Oh, definitely. Oh yeah, that's happening.
Yeah. There was a great I was talking about kind of comparing different quotes from people with certain alignments, and Anais Nin has what has she got? Moon, Venus, Neptune, and John Keats has Sun, Venus, Neptune, and these two quotes from them that just like beautifully encapsulate Venus, Neptune with the inflection of Moon and Sun. And I think what I'm going to paraphrase, I can't really remember, but basically Anais Nin says something like in love there is no sense. It just love is just love. It doesn't reason. It just it's this unreasoning thing. And so you get this like idealized love, right? You get this sense that like love and beauty are it with Venus Neptune, and it really is a beautiful combination. I mean, when you're in that Venus Neptune combination, you're just feeling like it is just like the flow of just like the beautiful, most graceful sides of the Divine Mother just like washing over you, right?
It's my favorite. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like it. Venus Neptune is as sweet as the universe can be.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And when you add the moon into that, it's even more kind of nourishing, but it brings in the irrational side, right? The moon is our feeling side. It's not it's not really making sense of things. It just is feeling and immersing and being, right?
Exactly. Like, Mom, what's for dinner tonight? Quiet, beloved child, I'm writing another poem.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, that again. Good. Thank you. um, yeah, but then John Keats, who has the sun conjunct or in some alignment with Venus and Neptune, says something like, "I am certain of nothing but the truth of beauty and the imagination, or and the heart's affections," or something like that.
Yeah,
And so,
triple conjunction. I think he had a sun Venus.
conjunction, yeah. Yeah. So I mean that's great because then the sun comes in with this idea of certainty and truth, and it is the light of reason shining onto it, and meaning and all of that, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah, good job. Yeah, that's really excellent. That's really good look at triads there and inflection from
Yeah,
another. Yeah, he was a beautiful, beautiful guy for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah. There's something I want to mention that you want to just go to April 8th, just advance.
Sure.
One other thing about this full moon, Sun, Moon, Neptune can be all about the mystical union of the feminine and masculine principles. People could have breakthroughs around that. On some deep level, we're all craving an experience of the divine consciousness, which the mystics tell us transcends all binaries and dualities and polarities. That's what we're really craving. And I don't think we can fully be satisfied until we have those kind of transcendent experiences within our being. And Sun, Moon, Neptune can really help us to feel that the divine is neither feminine nor masculine, but it contains them both.
Yeah, yeah. It's true, and I mean, really forming a relationship with those different aspects of the divine has been like, there are many ways to do it, but it's like the richest thing. I'm a my own spiritual practice is very like Shakti based. It's very Divine Mother based, and but it's really the Shiva Shakti thing, right? And it is that idea of like this. Um, you've got this like pure awareness, this kind of inert, like perfect eternal awareness on one side, which is what Shiva represents, and then you've got the Divine Mother, who is just everything in creation, just bursting forth again and again and again and again and again, and it's that flow back and forth that when you really feel that union, it's just like, oh goodness. um
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
so I'm looking forward to that full moon for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so April 8th, you get to look at that one. That is when Mars comes within orb of Neptune. So now we've got the triad Mars, Saturn, Neptune that kicks in on that day. And our friend and colleague John Waller has oops, sorry, has written out the several periods in the next 2 years when Mars, Saturn, and Neptune will be aligned. So April 9th, he has it to May 5th. That'll be a triple conjunction, and then August 18th to September 19th. That's a square. Mars will be in square with the Saturn Neptune. So, as far as psychedelics go, gear down. If you're uncertain of the set and setting, you don't really have a 100% trusting relationship, you don't really know the people who are leading the ceremony or whatever, maybe do a smaller amount under Mars, Saturn, Neptune from April 8th to, I think, May 9th, sort of around in there. It's, as I've said before, it's a little bit like camping in the rain. And you could have a good time under that, but
Yeah,
don't they take all the preparations that you need, which is sober sitters and soundproof space and enough physical contact if you need that, a hand to hold on to if you want that and need that, and things like that.
yeah, I think a good thing to like keep in mind with a nice way of thinking about Neptune is that like whatever Neptune touches, it's like gonna you're going to get the atmosphere of that, you'll be permeated, like your consciousness, the atmosphere, everything will be permeated by whatever the other archetype involved is. And so, that's why we're talking about with Saturn Neptune, there's this kind of grim, kind of downer sort of like kind of atmosphere, because we're just getting, it's like if you've ever seen Blade Runner, right? Like Ridley Scott's got that alignment. He's got some alignment of Saturn Neptune, and it's got that kind of like dystopian future, kind of just gritty kind of right. Now with Mars as well, what you get with Mars Neptune can be, Mars Neptune has it's got some beautiful sides to it, just like Saturn Neptune has some beautiful sides to it. There can be this kind of peaceful warrior kind of a thing, a kind of martial arts kind of flow, a subtlety, a subtle strength, and a ability to kind of to hook into the energetic flow at a more subtle level. But it can also, Mars can have this invasive, violating, deceptive, kind of thing that can come through when it comes in with Neptune. There can also be a sapping of energy. When you combine Saturn and Mars, if we take Neptune out of the picture for a second, when we combine Saturn and Mars, you got like this hard wall of Saturn, and you got this forceful, energy of Mars, that when they combine, there can be a lot of satisfaction to feeling some pressure and some tension, like it feels good to lift weights, right? Like you need to move your body, and like it can feel good, but it can also feel really hard. And particularly like if you're feeling the really grindy quality of Saturn Mars, it can at its ugliest, just turn into hate, right? Now, not everybody who's got this alignment is gonna like be going that way, but like Hitler had a combination of those planets, and he's like obviously like the world's best example of the worst. But yeah, so you just think about it at an energetic level of like tension, force and resistance just building up into tension. And what happens when that doesn't resolve? Well, you get hate, you get frustration, you get bitterness, resentment, and then you have Neptune coming in with the dissolving atmospheric kind of qualities, and then it's like, so I think that's maybe what you're saying as far as like why maybe this is not one that you want to take into your psychedelic sessions, kind of a thing.
Yeah, so yeah, April 9th or so to May 5th. Yeah, just think about doing a smaller amount if you really want to go through with this session. And don't think you're going to break through this energy by doing a heroic dose. As always with psychedelics, we need to be prepared to suffer, to lie down and just feel what's happening and go with the flow. But it can have a kind of a bit of a nightmarish quality, Mars, Saturn, Neptune, and we sometimes our doubt about the situation can extend to the safety of the environment itself. So we're not even sure if suffering is the right thing. Maybe there's some other thing we should do, and it can be quite confusing. So, don't put yourself in that situation.
Yeah.
Experienced psychonauts, you will undoubtedly be curious after hearing us speak to see what this is like, because this hasn't happened for a few years, like about 8, 9,
yeah
10 years or something or so. But do small amounts. Do small amounts. Smaller.
Good to know. Yeah. And also around that time, it looks like we got Mercury moon conjunction, squaring Pluto, right? Moving into a square with Pluto. So, that can also bring up some some heavy stuff, right? So particularly on that day, if you've got that kind of grim atmosphere, and then what can happen with the moon and Mercury is that the mind is just a little bit more activated, right? Like the thinking process is just a little bit more activated. And then you put Pluto with Mercury. Now it can be great, like during this time, it can be really great to just really bore into something, really like take a hard look, or really dredge some stuff up and like do some of the deep work. But it can also get into like obsessive thought loop type of stuff, like suspicious negative thinking, and then when you put the moon in there, that it's even more emotionally there's even more emotional material to it. So yeah. So yeah.
I wouldn't be afraid of those by themselves.
No.
Those would be hard in a group session where you have to kind of be quiet. You're only allowed to make this much sound, in a Groff breathwork, holotropic breathwork, or Groff style psychedelic session, you can make full sound for as long as you want and need. And that's better with Mercury, Moon, Pluto. You want to be able to blow your top,
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that like Prince had a Moon Pluto opposition, and he's a great example of Moon Pluto to me. I mean, it just comes through in his music. Just has this kind of like, there's just this, it's like the ultra Dionysian kind of energy that comes through with Moon Pluto. Just very, very primal, and just like purely, when you can purely connect to that energy, it really is a great one for sessions. If it weren't for the the Mars, Saturn, Neptune, because you do it's gonna just, stuff's gonna come up and out. Anyway, you got any final thoughts?
No, thank you. That's been really fun. Really looking forward to this, and just really happy to hear you're getting your PhD, and always look forward to anything you write and anything you're creating. I'll be interested to look at.
Well, likewise. Thank you very much.